This podcast is brought to you by Blackaby Ministries International. To find out more, visit blackaby.org.
Welcome to the Richard Blackaby Leadership Podcast. My name's Sam. I'm your host, helping take your leadership to the next level. And at it again, Dr. Richard Blackaby.
It's always good to be with you, Sam.
It's always a pleasure, Richard. It's never a dull moment. And we're just chuckling before we press record on some great stories of the past.
Oh, yes. Memory lane. As you get older, the lane gets longer.
Yeah, and there's more forgetfulness as well.
That's
so
right.
you can't see the beginning of that lane once you get to a certain point. But I'm sure you're far from that point.
Oh, yeah.
But there's no way to segue from that.
I got you in a pit. And you're not getting out. So.
Oh, I know. No shovel is big enough to for the work ahead of us here. But we'll press on anyways. And today, one of the things that if you look at any leader who is successful, or at least I would say most, if not all, it's one thing I think that sets them apart from leaders that aren't successful, or perhaps even people more broadly that struggle to succeed. It's their people skills, and it's sort of this can seem like a nebulous, intangible thing, I think, sometimes for people to say, well, he's just really good with people, or she just has a way with people to get them to, to buy in and to do what needs to be done, and there's something to it. And so today we want to look at the less nebulous side of that and the more concrete side of people skills, and to say, what are some things that we can do to be better with the people that we lead.
Yeah, and Sam, I remember years ago I was in Canada still, and there was he was an area director. He kind of was not a bishop, but he worked with pastors in the province, two provinces where I lived, and this guy was a very positive kind of guy. I mean, every time I saw him, he was always smiling, was always upbeat, and always laughing. But on that particular time where I saw him, he had just spent time with three pastors. All three pastors in different churches were all on the brink of being fired or tearing their church upside down and dividing it. And the pastor this area minister had been vainly trying to help these guys see that much of their problem was the way they were treating people, and that they were dying on mountains and hills that they didn't need to.
Yeah.
And this very positive minister, you could just tell he was just worn out. And I'll never forget, he looked at me and he said, "Richard, I've always thought that you could teach leadership." He said, "But I don't know that you can teach people skills." And he said, "I'm just about convinced that if you don't learn people skills in your home growing up, you probably never will." Wow. And that was very sobering, and I really had to think quite a bit about that. And I would tend to agree quite a bit with him in the sense that I do believe you can. When someone asks me, "Can you learn people skills?" I would say, yes, you can learn people skills, but I want to have one qualifier. You can learn leadership skills. The one qualifier is if you have people skills. If you know how to get along with people, I can teach you how to lead. If you don't know how to get along with people, I'm not sure I can teach you leadership. You can fill your head with leadership principles, but if you don't know how to get along with people, I don't know that it will do you any good. And so I thought maybe today we would just talk about that, and we probably need to this is going to be just meat and potatoes. And I know I've got a number of CEO friends that I work with who listen to this podcast. I know leaders that work with $1 billion+ companies who listen to this podcast, and they are outstanding with people skills. And so a lot of what I'm going to say today is going to seem really obvious to them and to many of you as our listeners today. But I think it's just important somewhere along the line with these podcasts to at least put one out there to say, some of you listening,
So this
probably need
isn't
to
for
pay
everyone,
attention.
but
Yeah. Because
for
this
some
is
of you.
just meat and potatoes. And this may not really even necessarily be for you, but it may apply to someone that you work with, someone that you lead, someone perhaps you're trying to help to develop as a leader. And you may have the same question I have. I can send them to leadership seminars. I can give them leadership books to read. But if they, without even trying, just effortlessly offend everyone in the room when they come to a meeting, then I don't know that there's enough leadership books they can read that will help them. And so let me just mention a couple things. And some of this is not just about leadership. It's just in work, in your work life.
Yeah.
And some of these, like I said, will sound very obvious, but it's amazing how, like this afternoon, Sam, I'm heading out of town. I'm going, flying to Texas here in a couple of hours. And I know full well I'm going to be checking in. I'm going to be dealing with customer service and so on. I'll be in lines and security. And you deal with people in the public sphere and you see all sorts. And you deal with some people that there's times I just stop and think, wow, that person's really good at what they do. I dealt with them and I feel better about myself and life in general having dealt with them. And others, you deal with them and you're ready to jump off a bridge. It's like, wow, I was feeling pretty good about life till I had to, do business with that person.
Yeah.
So here's a couple of things. First one is just learn to smile. I'll tell you what, you could increase sales. You could increase customer satisfaction. You could increase retention in people who work with you simply by learning to smile more than you do. And it's just amazing to me. If I've got to go talk to someone in customer service, or I've got to go up to a counter and purchase something or ask a question, if the person dealing with me looks up at me and immediately smiles, I'm immediately disarmed. I mean, I'm immediately predisposed to think well of whatever they tell me next.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you how many times I've had to deal with people in public and they look at you and just emotionless or frowning, or it's almost like you're an interruption to their day. You're an inconvenience to them. And I think a lot of times,
Because quite frankly, you might be.
Yeah.
Like that's how they may
compared
see you.
to what they were texting their friend at the time, and now they've got to solve one of your problems for you. And but I'll tell you, and in sitting in meetings, if I'm sitting around a boardroom table and I've got someone sitting there that's just frowning, that can change the whole mood of the meeting because someone just obviously looks unhappy, upset, powder keg or whatever. But when someone is smiling, if I'm leading a meeting, I tend to want to look and interact with the one who's smiling, not the one who's frowning. If I'm going to call on someone or ask their opinion, it's probably going to be the one that's smiling, that seems supportive. Mm-hmm. So many doors open just by smiling. And yet I've known some people that just their whole careers were just difficult. They didn't get promoted. They didn't get opportunities. They didn't have a lot of success. But you look at them and they never smile. Like they just look like have embraced the fact that they're going to have a miserable life and a miserable career.
Yeah.
And I think some people have no idea. They don't even realize that they're not smiling. It's like we talk about a resting face, where when you're just kind of just resting, where you're not trying to express any feeling, you're just sitting there. And yet for some of us, our face sort of just naturally gravitates to a frown, and we don't even know we're frowning. Yeah. But I can tell you, the people that seem to glide through their careers and advancements and promotions tend to be the ones that appear, that are smiling, that seem positive. And kind of one that goes along with that is, secondly, just be upbeat. There are people that just take all of their baggage from home and their personal life with them to work.
Yeah.
If they're having a bad day, everybody knows it. And they don't even try to hide it. They don't try to put it away in a closet somewhere while they're at work. They're having a bad day and everybody knows it. And I'll tell you, I've had flight attendants that it looked like they were just going through a divorce during the flight. They were just they just seemed miserable. They didn't want to be bothered.
So for the person who says, well, Richard, I feel like I have to be my authentic self.
Yeah,
I don't want to fake it.
Yeah, that's a great.
How do I handle that? How do I?
I would
get
say,
over that?
you know what? Your work is not meant to be a therapy session for you. You are there if you're in a customer service, especially oriented business, or if you're in sales or in any way a service industry. I think we've kind of lost sight of the fact. I don't want someone working for me that is going to have to process all of their emotional baggage during the 8 hours I'm paying them to work for me. I want them. That used to be called professionalism. Now, I mean, that's fine if there's a difference, I think, between like if I come to your store and want to buy something from you, it's not my fault that you had a fight with your spouse as you were going out of work that day, or you got cut off at work in traffic. I mean, I don't want to sound heartless, but I didn't come there to try to make you feel better. I came there to buy some 2x4s. And so professionalism says, hey, this person doesn't know me. They just came to get a service from me. And I've got to put my own issues aside right now and be customer focused. Our problem is we become so self-centered as a society, so self-absorbed that we can't even do business anymore if we don't feel like it.
Right.
And I would say, well, that's not in your contract, that if you're having a bad day, you don't have to be good at your job. Customer service means that you're upbeat. It means you're customer centered, which means the customer comes first. It means you are there to make the customer have a good experience. Not the customer doesn't come in your store to make you feel better about yourself. And we have gotten into this interesting stage of society where now if you're having a bad day, you feel perfectly right to just wallow in your own issues. And you see this a lot with people on the phone. If you ever try to get help and someone was just on a personal call while they're supposed to be caring for customers or doing service for people. And there's an increasing kind of attitude that says, well, I'm having a bad day. Just wait a minute. I'm on a call right now. Well, that may be so, but you're never going to find yourself in management with that kind of attitude. And so if you want to be successful as a leader, learn, and we've all been there where we were going through some really tough times ourselves. I've been on the road a lot. There's times where my family was having a hard time. Stuff was, falling apart back at home, and my wife was saying, when are you getting home? The 2 toilets aren't flushing, and this is happening, and the car is making a funny sound, and and you still got 2 more days of road trip. But then you got to get on with your job. You got to lead. There's times you just have to put that behind you and say, well, in this moment, what am I called to do? And can I do it well? And can I be upbeat? And there's, I think, a difference between just trying to be your best and be a phony. There's times where I'm not all just giggling and laughing about everything. But can you still be as positive as you can be? And I tell people, especially when you're starting out, if you want to catch the eye of management, just be upbeat. Just come into meetings positive, ready to take on a new challenge. And lo and behold, you're going to be getting opportunities to do that.
For sure.
A third thing is just notice people. Just this week, I was hearing about someone that has developed a reputation that if they think you're higher up than them on the org chart, they'll be your best friend. If you're below them, you're dirt. All they care about is and you're just a rung in the ladder. And so if you're just an ordinary person, they could care less about you. But, I've noticed oftentimes people that are very strong leaders are people that do show an interest in people, whether they're going to help you out or not.
Right.
And things like when you're talking to someone, just look them in the eye, look in the face. It's amazing to me now, especially younger generations that have looked into so many screens, that that it's becoming a lost art to look someone in the eye and to smile at them and to engage with them face to face. And of course, a tough one, and one that's not necessarily easy for me, but remember people's names. Ask what their name is, and then remember it, and be careful. I've known some people that it was very mechanical. They asked your name. Oh, your name's Sam, and then every sentence they worked the name Sam in. It's like, okay, now this is just irritating. I don't feel affirmed. I feel like it's just a technique that you're using with me. So don't try to overuse it, but it does really make a difference if you're talking to someone for 5 minutes and you get their name, and then as you're wrapping it up, you say, "Well, Sam, been great to meet you. Great talking to you." And it just says, "Okay, it's amazing." It seemed like a small thing, but when someone takes the time even to remember your name, it says that they showed at least enough interest in you to remember something very basic about you.
Yeah.
And I know lots of people, and I'm guilty of this. I'll hear their name, and then my mind has gotten onto the conversation we're having and different details, and I've lost it. My wife's much better than I am at remembering names.
Yeah.
But because it takes effort. It takes effort to remember people's names. And so when you do remember someone's name, that tells me you thought I was worth making the effort to remember my name. So
It can really make a person feel good.
Yeah.
Especially if they didn't expect you to remember the name.
And I mean, I try that with just even things like Lyft rides to the airport. You know, I don't need to know the person's name that's taking me there, but you can see it usually on your app when they're coming to get you, and you get in their car, and you might call their name just to make sure you're in the right car. And then I tend to try to at least have a pleasant conversation with my driver if they want to. And then when you're done, just use their first name and say, "Hey, well, thanks for the ride. Hope you have a great day, the rest of your day." You know what? I'm not climbing any ladder because I remembered my Lyft driver's name, but what that says is, if you can be that kind of person with everybody you deal with, you're going to just you're going to build a bunch of bridges with people.
Yeah.
And some people, they may never take you anywhere further in your career, but over time, you're going to just surround yourself with a lot of positive vibes from people that liked being around you and liked how you dealt with them. I find just a fourth thing is just to ask questions about people. Just, be curious about people, and show an interest. I know some people that they do all the talking. I've had some Lyft rides like that. My drivers just talked my ear off, and that was fine. But it was obvious they didn't really care about me. But when you ask questions, and I may, like, I want to make it sound like I'm a big deal, but like I may have just flown back from Thailand or someplace, and I'm on a Lyft ride home, and my driver is telling me about some pretty mundane experience in their life. They've just picked me up at the airport. Like if you just pick them up at the international terminal of the airport, they probably have done something kind of interesting or been somewhere interesting. Some people will ask all kinds of questions. Well, where have you been? Or like, what do you do for a living? And what's that like? I've never been there. Other people will just be talking about, real ordinary kinds of stuff and not show any interest. And so I've just tried in my own relational tool chest to just try to work at showing interest in all kinds of people, even people that are very different than me. And I may know I don't agree with this person on lots of fronts, but still they're a human being. And I find leaders, if you find people interesting, people tend to be interested in you too. You become an interesting person yourself. So lots of ways. We can maybe after the break look at a few more, but don't ever take those for granted. You just notice people that are really good with people, and a lot of times you don't even know why at first. You just think, wow, everybody likes that person. I mean, that person walks in the room and people just gravitate toward them, or they seem to have so many friends, or it just seems like there's always someone that's doing something for that person, or giving them an opportunity, or inviting them to join them in some venture. And why is it that never happens to me? And a lot of times you have to kind of just really watch those people And you begin to realize, well, I've noticed there's certain things they do with people that others don't do. There is a skill set. It can be very innate, but there are certain things that people do when it comes to people skills that just over time opens all kinds of doors for them that don't open for people that don't have those skills.
Well, let's take a quick break here, and we'll find out what else we can do to further our people skills when we come back. Richard and Daniel Blackaby will be at the Billy Graham Training Center at the Cove on May 17th through 19th, 2021. The title of this event is On the Move, How God Increases Your Spiritual Influence. You can find out more and register at thecove.org. Links will also be in the show notes. Well, Richard, I really like this this topic because there are these little things where you don't think about what it is that makes somebody so magnetic or just really interesting to be around, or why they're such a good leader. And I like kind of breaking down some of that magic. And I feel like that's kind of what we've been doing over the past few minutes here. And we've got some more magic to break down.
Bring on the magic
before the end. And so why don't you keep taking us through these little changes, these small mindset shifts that we can do that can make us a better people person, which in turn makes us a better leader.
Yeah, I think I maybe told the story once before, but Winston Churchill's mother used to wine and dine with all the dignitaries of England, and she had sat next to a number of prime ministers and kings over the years of England, and she was reflecting at one point on the difference when she sat next to Gladstone when he was prime minister, and when she sat next to Disraeli when he was prime minister. And she said, when I sat next to Gladstone, who was elected 4 different times as prime minister, she said, I came away really impressed with what he knew. He was a very smart man who could talk about all kinds of topics. She said, when I sat next to Disraeli, I came away impressed with what I knew. And Disraeli was a master at asking questions and showing interest in people. And so Disraeli got her talking about all of her experiences. Gladstone just pontificated about all of his. Well, that's people skills.
Yeah.
Disraeli just was blessed with those. And so showing interest in people, everybody likes to talk about themselves. And so if you ask the right questions and you know how to get people opening up, I've got some friends like that you can get into a Lyft ride, Uber ride, and the person is just masterful at asking questions. And I mean, before you've gotten to your destination, the driver's a blabbermouth. I mean, they're just talking away about everything, and they feel what a wonderful time they had. It was someone showing interest in them. It's amazing the power of just having the ability to ask the right questions. So a couple other things to say. Another one I've kind of touched on is just don't be artificial. I know some people that it doesn't come across as natural with them. I remember having a waiter one time like that. I went to a restaurant with some friends. We really wanted to get caught up, and this young guy came blowing in, and you could tell he was trying to be this really gregarious, fun party kind of good times waiter, but it didn't work for him. It just wasn't natural. He was saying all the lines that someone would use if they really were that kind of person, but it was obvious that it was just didn't fit them, and it wasn't natural. And besides, we hadn't gone to the restaurant to hear him talk. We had come to catch up with each other. And we had to, it was just kind of a turnoff. And it was like, okay, that's not working for you. I know you're aiming for a big tip, but actually the less you say, the bigger your tip may be. So just don't keep bothering us. But sometimes it's just artificial. And when you're working on this, sometimes it can seem that way because you're trying to show interest. You're trying to ask questions.
Yeah.
You've got to kind of work at it to where it is natural, and it's got to fit your personality.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I think you maybe see somebody who you want to emulate what they do, but when you do it, it definitely doesn't feel or come across as the same as that person that you're trying to be like. So you have to figure out, okay, what things can you take from their personality that actually mesh with who you are as a person, not trying to change your personality to do this, but to do it in such a way that makes sense for you.
Yeah, and and so that's where you can't just copy someone, point for point, because it's got to be natural if you're going to do it and be effective. Another issue would be just avoid controversy. I remember getting on a shuttle to a hotel from an airport last year, and I was the only guy in the shuttle, and the driver, as soon as I got in, he made a comment basically to let me know he didn't like the president. And I said, oh, why is that? And he, well, because he doesn't tell the truth. And now he doesn't know how I vote or what I thought about that president. I'm a total stranger, and he's telling me that if I like the current president, then he doesn't agree with me. And I remember at the time just kind of laughing with him and saying, well, are you telling me that there are politicians out there that do tell the truth? I said, tell me any recent presidents that always told the truth. And he's like, okay, well, that may be so. I just pushed back a little. I was trying, but I just thought to myself, my word, if you're trying to like make a good impression with customers, you don't slam half the population of the country. Odds are 50-50 that someone on your shuttle doesn't agree with you politically, and you've just alienated them. And so whether you're the one saying it or it's the other person saying it, I've just kind of learned that there's just a lot of battles not worth fighting. And certainly if I'm trying to build a bridge with someone, I'm not going to lead off with some of the hot potatoes you could have. So just, think carefully about the kind of things you talk about, where you go, what you let just pass. Some of us just love a good debate, and we know we could make mincemeat out of this shuttle driver if we wanted to. But why would we? Why would we do that? Just let's let it pass and move on. And of course, another one is just say thank you. Say thank you for. I tend to do that when I'm getting off an airplane. I do that a lot. Just thank the crew, thank the flight attendant, thank the captain. Thank people that check you in at hotels. Thank people for just the service they give you. Especially when they've gone over and beyond to help you out.
Yeah.
And I've had some people that were just phenomenal the way they helped me solve my problem. And they were relentless. They didn't give me the quick answer, the brush off. Well, try that. Maybe that'll work. They stayed with me to make sure that I was pleased. And I had a guy help me the other day, and I asked him, I said, hey, am I going to get a survey? Like, I said, are they going to survey me and ask me about my satisfaction with you? Because I said, I want them to, because I want to give you a 10 out of 10. I give you an 11 out of 10. And he was like real kind of blown away. And I said, I just want to thank you. Like you have gone the extra mile, and I noticed it, and I really appreciate it. And I love dealing with guys like you. Get in the habit of doing that, especially when they work with you, when they're in your company. Maybe when they report to you. Take time to notice especially when they go the extra mile, when they do something well. Too many times we notice it, but we don't ever say anything about it. And of course, writing a thank you note is just a lost art now, especially in younger generations. But I'll tell you what, there's something very powerful. Someone sent me a thank you note last week that I work with, and you don't expect it. And then you get this little note, and they just notice certain things that you did, certain efforts that you made. And you realize, you know what that does, of course, it inspires you to keep making those efforts when you realize, I guess people notice. I guess it really makes a difference for people. So just people that say thank you tend to have more reasons to say thank you. When you have a habit of saying thank you, people want to serve you. They want to go the extra mile for you because you notice. And another one is just read the cues. And this is really, in many ways, the essence of people skills. It really boils down to empathy. Can you hone in to the emotions that are going on right now? And that is the essence of people skills, is you're tapping into their feelings. And if they're upset, maybe here's a Lyft driver that just wants to be left alone and get the ride done. Well, you if you're paying attention, after about 2 comments, you can figure it out.
Yeah.
I got in the car the other day with someone, and I made a comment as I got in, and they didn't answer me, and so I thought maybe they didn't hear me, and so I said something else, and I thought it was a very brief comment, so I thought, well, hey, I don't need I don't need another friend, I'm just getting a ride home, but I still wasn't quite sure, and so I made one last comment, and they began opening. I actually got her to laugh, and the next thing, but we were like best buds by the time I got to my house. But you're paying attention, and there are some people that maybe they just need their space, and that's fine. Like, no, we don't have to talk the whole way.
Yeah.
But I know other people that just aren't reading the cues. I never forget being on an airplane one time. There was a woman. I think she sounded like she was a Christian, unfortunately, but she was a Christian who loved to talk, and she loved to talk loud enough for everybody on our half of the airplane to hear her talk. And she didn't like to listen so much as she liked to talk, and she had some opinions that were maybe for other Christians, they would find it okay. But if you weren't a Christian, you weren't a churchgoer, you might be quite offended at the way she talked. And I just remember just grimacing, listening to this woman talking. And it was clear that the person she was talking to really didn't want to be talking anymore, but this woman wouldn't take no for an answer. In fact, she kind of she sort of bragged at one point about how she could just talk to a lamp post, a fire hydrant, and I remember just this woman. She was a couple rows behind me, and you could just tell it was just getting very painful. And you could feel the tension in the whole area. You could just physically feel the tension in people being forced to listen to this person. And finally, I think when her poor seatmate had enough and put on noise-canceling headphones or something, that she turned to the person on the other side of her and starts talking, and the person, you could just tell, was just steaming mad. And all she'd been doing is listening to this point. And she just gave her some brush off that right away, even this woman couldn't miss. But I thought to myself, you've been talking and talking and talking, and everybody on the plane can tell you're annoying, and you haven't picked up on a thing. You think you're like some delightful person that everybody likes to listen to. And of course, that's just a total lack of empathy, where you're just not in touch with the vibe. People tend to put out vibes, and people that are really good at that just have a sense of that. Sometimes I've had to deal with people in a service industry, and sometimes it's just obvious they were on a call before me, or maybe a customer ahead of me was chewing into them. And there's times I've had to go in and say, hey, it sounds like you're having a kind of rough day today. And boy, they'll just look at you with almost a sense of relief, like, oh, okay, good. You're someone that can tell. Like, yeah. I'm not just a doormat ready to get beat up again. And so I just find people with people skills are in touch. Some people are in a great mood and they just pass it on. Some people are just, they come in and lift everyone's spirits. Some people just realize, okay, here's a person who just needs some space right now, and they don't need me to be a chatterbox right now, just get the job done. But people skills, but if you don't have that empathy, I find the same empathy makes teachers really effective. Teachers can tell when they've lost their class and they shift gears, they switch to something else. Other teachers don't pick up on that, and they just keep droning on and on and on, boring their students to tears. It's being able to read the emotion in the room and in an individual. And so read the cues. And maybe just the last thing is just build bridges. Build bridges with people. And what I've just been reminded again that it just seems like everybody has issues. Like everybody is dealing with stuff. Everybody's got baggage. Yeah. Everyone's had bad days and disappointments and hurts and frustrations, unexpected bills and so on. And nobody, there's just a lot of people that aren't at their best, but they're people. And just recognize that people have bad days, but there's also value in people, and so learn just to value people for who they are in all their imperfections, and celebrate who they are and who you got to meet and some of the wonderful stories that you can learn if you ask the right questions. But just don't burn bridges.
Yeah.
I've known people that were just so careless in the way that they treated other people and had no idea that they were burning bridges of opportunity for them. Things came around, and now people were looking for someone else to serve here or to be hired there. And the people had no idea they'd burned all the opportunities and bridges that might have given them a new opportunity because they just carelessly had mistreated people, not conducted themselves well. And so that's just kind of a quick whirlwind. But there's so much to people skills. And in fact, we invite our listeners, if you've got some great other people skill advice, maybe something that someone told you early on or when you were starting out, or particularly with parents. And I might get into that in another podcast, but so much of these skills really are best learned in your home by your mom, your dad, just teaching you that it's not all about you, teach you to say thank you, teach you to look people in the eye when you're talking to them, teaching you not to just take the microphone and want to be the center of attention all the time. Yeah. So much that parents ought to be teaching us so that we just naturally do that in our relationships as adults. But unfortunately, a lot of us didn't learn that then. Yeah. And so I would just say every one of us, myself included, could be better at people skills. And so you'll never regret developing people skills along your leadership journey. They will open all kinds of doors for you if you'll just give some attention to it. And don't do it artificially. Truly be a person who cares about others, and you'll always have people around you who care about you.
Yeah. Well, again, another episode filled with great practical advice. And as always, we appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If this is something you enjoyed, it really makes a difference if you leave a review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. We always love hearing from our listeners, so email us at podcast@blackaby.org.